Have you ever wondered how a simple Roman soldier could rise to the top of the Praetorian Guard, the most powerful group in the empire? It wasn't just about strength, but about facing extreme challenges. The Praetorian Guard, which controlled the fate of emperors and the entire Roman Empire, was not a place for everyone. It was necessary to face unthinkable challenges, deal with betrayals, and use strategies that few would dare to try, and build strategic alliances. In this video, you will discover 15 incredible facts about this ascension journey, stories that reveal courage, ambition, and overcoming. Get ready to be inspired and learn lessons that can transform your view of power and achievement. Have you ever heard of a group so powerful that it decided who would live and who would die at the center of the greatest empire in history? The Praetorian Guard was more than just an army of elite soldiers. They were the backrooms of power in Rome, the invisible manipulators who shaped the fate of emperors and, consequently, the world. Now imagine yourself living in that time, watching from afar ordinary men transform themselves into figures who carried the fate of the empire in their hands. How was this possible? This is exactly what we will unveil now. The Praetorian Guard was not just a military troop. They were strategists, politicians, and often the authors of the stories that no one had the courage to tell. But while they were revered, they were also feared. And why? Because in Rome, power always carried a price, and that price was often paid in blood. It's fascinating, isn't it, to think that soldiers who began their lives as simple men could, with ambition and cunning, rise to the ranks of such an exclusive group. Before we continue, I want you to think about something. What would make an ordinary person indispensable to an empire? Doesn't that arouse your curiosity? If so, stay with me, because in the next few minutes, we're going to dive into stories that aren't in the run-of-the-mill history books. These stories are full of mysteries, betrayals, and decisions that have shaped the course of humanity. Let's imagine a moment in the life of an ordinary Roman soldier. He had no great prospects for wealth or influence. Their days were consumed by grueling marches, intense battles, and few rewards. Now think about the impact the opportunity to join the Praetorian Guard would have on his life. It wasn't just a job. It was a ticket to a completely different world, a world of power and privilege, and at the same time, a world of incalculable dangers. It is interesting how the promise of power can transform human ambition. But what exactly happened inside these ranks? How did a soldier earn the right to walk among the most influential in Rome? Every step was carefully calculated. Every decision could lead to glory or ruin. There is no doubt that the Praetorian Guard was a mirror of Rome itself, glorious and ruthless. Have you ever tried to unravel what made Rome the largest empire in the world, but ended up lost in an avalanche of details? Don't worry, you're not alone. Imagine finally mastering the most decisive moments in Roman history, learning about the brilliant strategies of generals like Julius Caesar and Scipio Africanus, and understanding how their tactics shaped the fate of the world. With that in mind, I created the digital book, The 10 Battles That Shaped the Roman Empire, where you will have access to a clear, objective analysis full of exclusive curiosities. Discover how Rome won battles considered impossible and become a true expert in Roman military history. Don't waste time. Access the pinned comment and guarantee your copy right now. Enjoy it before the units run out. What makes the story of these men even more intriguing is the direct impact they had on the destinies of emperors. From Caligula to Claudius, the Praetorian Guard not only witnessed the empire's most dramatic moments, but was often at the center of them. We are not talking about conventional battles. We're talking about power plays, palace intrigues, and decisions that could change the course of history in the blink of an eye. But don't think that life in the Praetorian Guard was a bed of roses. Being part of this group meant living in a constant state of alert. One misstep, one wrong word, and it could all be over. Even within Rome's most powerful force, no one was safe from the conspiracies that ran through the corridors of power. And now, I want you to imagine something even more fascinating. What would it be like these days to live in an environment as intense as that? Would it be possible to survive in the midst of so much conflict, so much drama, so much uncertainty? These questions are just the beginning of what we'll explore in this video. And let me tell you, the more you find out about the Praetorian Guard, the harder it is to look back on the past without feeling the emotion of the stories it holds. Therefore, I invite you to dive into this journey with me, not only to learn the 15 incredible facts about the rise in the Praetorian Guard, but to understand how these soldiers shaped the course of history in ways you may never have imagined. Prepare to be surprised, to question what you know about power, and to reflect on how seemingly small decisions can have gigantic impacts. After all, whoever controls power controls history, and in ancient Rome, the Praetorian Guard was the one who held the reins of this power. Before I continue, I saw here that you forgot to subscribe to the channel. You won't want to miss all the content about Rome that I will always be bringing. Did you know that the Praetorian Guard started out as something very different from what it later became? Initially, they were not the controllers of the most important decisions of the empire, but a discreet group with the sole mission of protecting Roman generals in times of war. It's fascinating to think how such a simple force managed to evolve into the most powerful entity in Rome. But why did this happen? And more importantly, what caused these men to become so coveted by those who aspired to power? Imagine Republican Rome, a scene full of bloody battles and fierce political disputes. Roman generals, the men in charge, needed constant protection as they led their armies. After all, a leader killed on the battlefield could mean total defeat for his troops. It was in this context that the Praetorian Guard was born, an elite force composed of reliable and highly trained men, hand-selected to protect the generals. But don't be fooled into thinking that they were just ordinary bodyguards. These soldiers were chosen for their exceptional skills, unquestioning loyalty and courage in the most dangerous situations. As time passed, however, something curious happened. The power of the Praetorian Guard grew, and they began to stand out not only as protectors, but also as strategists and influencers in Rome's political landscape. Now think about it. What could turn a simple group of soldiers into one of the most feared and influential bodies in history? This rise did not happen by chance. During the Empire, the Praetorian Guard came to occupy a privileged position, very close to the emperors. But with that proximity came greater responsibilities, and even higher stakes. The Guard not only defended the throne, but also, in many cases, decided who sat on it. Yes, they had the power to make and unmake emperors. Before we continue, I want you to reflect on this. How many times have you heard of people who started simple and conquered positions of great influence? The story of the Praetorian Guard is a perfect example of this. They started out as loyal protectors, and over time they became the real players of power in Rome. And this leads us to an intriguing question. How far does human ambition go when power is at stake? For all the grandeur associated with the Praetorian Guard, their simple origins as protectors of generals remind us of something important. Greatness doesn't always start big. Many soldiers who joined the Praetorian ranks had only one motivation: to survive. But once inside, they quickly realized the potential of their position. After all, being close to the center of power was an opportunity that no one wanted to waste. However, this proximity also had dangerous consequences. As fascinating as the power amassed by the Praetorian Guard was, it also put them at constant risk. Loyalty was often questioned, and betrayals were more common than one might think. Being a Praetorian was not only an honor, but also a daily challenge of survival in a ruthless political game. Now let's face it, who wouldn't want to have the power to decide the fate of an empire? But at the same time, who would be willing to pay the price for it? These are questions that continue to echo when we think about the history of the Praetorian Guard. If you could be part of the Praetorian Guard, would you choose loyalty to the emperor or use power to shape history? Tell me here in the comments. I want to know what you would do. Imagine living in ancient Rome, where the dream of many young people was to become part of the most powerful elite in the empire, the Praetorian Guard. But what did it take to get into this exclusive group? Was it enough to be a good soldier, or was there something more? Prepare to find that the path to the Praetorian Guard was one of the most difficult and selective you can imagine, and in the end, you'll realize that the privilege of being there wasn't just a matter of ability, but also of origin, influence, and unwavering loyalty. To begin with, you couldn't just apply to be a Praetorian. It didn't work that way. Only the most experienced soldiers in the Roman army, those who had already proven their worth in battle, could even dream of this opportunity. And even among them, only those who came from respectable families were considered. Now, imagine the frustration of a talented soldier without an influential last name, knowing that his chance of entering this narrow circle was almost non-existent. In addition, approval did not depend only on military history. Powerful recommendations were almost mandatory. That means you'd need someone important, perhaps a general or a senator, to secure your entry. It wasn't just about what you knew how to do, but about who you knew. Now stop for a moment and think, how many times in your own life have you felt this way? Seeing opportunities being given to those who had the right contacts and not necessarily the merit. Ancient Rome was not so different from the world we know today. Once approved, the challenges were just beginning. Training for the Praetorian Guard was brutal. It wasn't just about military skill, it was a complete transformation. Each soldier needed to be strong, agile, and above all, mentally resilient. After all, they weren't just defending Rome, they were protecting the emperor, and that meant facing dangers that went far beyond the battlefields. Political intrigues, conspiracies, and betrayals were constant, and each Praetorian needed to be prepared to act quickly in the face of any threat. Now, I want you to imagine something. Think about going through weeks, maybe months, of tests that not only tested your physical abilities, but also your loyalty. The leaders of the Guard needed to make sure that you would never turn against the emperor, even in the most difficult situations. This included situations in which the very life of a Praetorian was at stake. It's scary, isn't it? Knowing that their loyalty could be tested to the limit, and that any slip-up could spell the end. Going back to the journey of the Praetorians, there was also an almost mythical component to the national team. Becoming part of the Guard meant joining a group that, in the eyes of Roman society, was seen as something beyond the ordinary. They weren't just soldiers, they were an elite. When a young man finally donned the Praetorian uniform, he not only earned a title, but also a social status that few could achieve. And with that came rare privileges, such as higher salaries, early retirement, and the chance to live close to absolute power. But there was something curious about all this. As rigorous as the process was, it was not infallible. In some cases, less qualified people were able to enter the Guard thanks to the influence of powerful figures. This created an atmosphere of rivalry within the ranks, where each soldier had to prove day after day that he deserved to be there. Imagine the constant tension of living surrounded by colleagues who could be both your allies and your competitors. It wasn't just a power play, it was a game of survival. And here's a reflection for you. If you were there, would you have the courage to face this challenge, to join the Praetorian Guard and deal with everything it demanded? Or would you rather stay in a safer position, away from the epicenter of power? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you would do if you were in the heart of the Roman Empire. The history of the Praetorian Guard shows us that even in ancient times, power and prestige were won with effort, sacrifice, and often luck. But it also teaches us that the greatest challenges come with the greatest prizes, and in the case of the Praetorians, the greatest of them was to be at the center of the decisions that shaped the world. Imagine living in a time where the simple fact of wearing a uniform could change your life forever. Being a soldier in the Praetorian Guard was just that, a ticket to an existence of privilege that few in the Roman Empire could even dream of. While most Roman soldiers faced cold, hunger, and death on the borders of the empire, the Praetorians lived in Rome, surrounded by luxury, power, and an influence bordering on royalty. But was this life as perfect as it seems? The Praetorians were not just soldiers, they were status symbols. Their salaries were much higher than those of ordinary legionaries, and they still received generous bonuses at strategic moments, such as on the emperor's birthday or after important military victories. Now think with me, who wouldn't want to earn extra just for being in the right place with the right connections? But this comfortable life came with a price. And it was a high price. Before we talk about the dangers, let's dive a little deeper into what made the Praetorians' lives so enviable. They didn't have to march into distant territories or face daily battles. Instead, they lived in the heart of the empire, near the center of power. Many had luxurious homes, wine-fueled parties, and invitations to events that other citizens could never have imagined. They were like a military and social elite, seen almost as sword-wielding aristocrats. But the proximity to power brought unique challenges. After all, being part of such an exclusive group meant being constantly in the eye of influential people, and not always in a positive way. Conspiracies and betrayals were a constant part of a Praetorian's life. In many cases, the enemy was not outside the walls of Rome, but rather within the corridors of power. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live like this, knowing that every person around you could be both an ally and a threat? If you think the Praetorians' life was easy, think again. They carried an immense responsibility to protect the emperor, even if it meant sacrificing their own lives. But the ironic thing was that they often became the ones responsible for overthrowing the emperors they swore to protect. Yes, the Praetorian Guard was not just a military group, It was a political force, capable of deciding who would rise or fall from the throne. And for those on the inside, that meant constantly walking a fine line between privilege and danger. Going back to the lives of the Praetorians, there was something even more intriguing about them: public perception. To Roman citizens, they were almost untouchable. There was an aura of mystery surrounding their lives. Some saw them as heroes, others as villains. But no one could deny that they played a central role in the history of Rome. And it's this duality, luxury and risk, power and vulnerability, that makes their stories so fascinating. If you are enjoying this plunge into history, let your like help me keep bringing these fascinating stories to you. Finally, it's important to remember that as glamorous as the life of a Praetorian was, it was also incredibly lonely. Surrounded by wealth and power, many lived in constant fear of being betrayed by their own peers, or even the leaders they served. This creates an interesting lesson for all of us. Sometimes the things we desire most come with a price that we are not always prepared to pay. And don't forget to get your digital book 10 Battles That Shaped the Roman Empire. It's very important that you get it right now. Before the units run out, imagine being in the heart of Rome, where every move within the Praetorian Guard was like a chess piece on a gigantic political chessboard. Being strong and skilled with a sword was important, but it wasn't enough to ensure ascension within the Guard. In fact, the real power was not in arms, but in alliances. And these alliances could mean the difference between being just another soldier or reaching the top as commander of one of the most influential groups in the empire. The Praetorian Guard was the living example that in Rome, personal connections were often worth more than anything done on the battlefield. To rise through the ranks, a soldier needed more than bravery. He needed political intelligence. Knowing how to please the right person at the right time was essential. Many soldiers quickly learned that gaining the trust of senators, consuls, or even the emperor himself could open doors that years of military service could never achieve. Now stop for a moment and think, how many times in your own life have you seen situations where merit seemed less important than who you knew? In the Praetorian Guard, this was even more evident. Loyalty to the emperor was crucial, but being useful to him or to Rome's influential leaders was what really made the difference. This dynamic made the environment within the Guard not only competitive, but also a veritable minefield of intrigue and strategy. Praetorians who wished to rise through the ranks had to cultivate a kind of double game. They needed to demonstrate strength and discipline as soldiers, but they also needed to be skilled diplomats, cultivating strategic relationships with those who held power. This included offering political support, protecting secrets, or even carrying out questionable orders, as long as it put them in a position of advantage. And here's a curious fact. Many times, these soldiers knew that pleasing a single person could change their lives forever. Think about it. A gesture of loyalty, a well-calculated favor, or even an act of courage at the right time could mean a promotion that would put the soldier in command of entire troops. But at the same time, a mistake or a poorly planned betrayal could mean the end not only of a career but of life itself. If you were in ancient Rome, how would you play this game? Would he try to please everyone or risk relying on a few alliances? Tell me in the comments, because this is a question that leads us to reflect on the cost of power and ambition. Returning to life within the Guard, favoritism was as powerful a weapon as any sharp blade. Many of the most famous Praetorian commanders rose to the top, not because they were the most skilled, but because they had friends in the right places. This created a hierarchy where political skills often trumped military skills. And at the same time, it made the indoor environment even more dangerous. Every promotion generated envy. Every broken alliance generated enemies. The role of the emperor in this dynamic cannot be ignored either. Many Roman emperors used the Praetorian Guard as an extension of their political influence. They rewarded loyal soldiers with prestigious positions and eliminated those they considered a threat. This close relationship made the Praetorian Guard both a shield and a sword in the emperor's hand. But as we have seen throughout history, this proximity also meant that the Praetorians could become the greatest enemies of the throne. As complicated as it was to rise through the ranks of the Praetorian Guard, those who managed to reach leadership positions had access to unprecedented power. Not only did they lead the empire's most feared soldiers, but they also influenced political decisions and shaped the fate of Rome. This made ambition both a driving force and a dangerous trap. And here's the most fascinating point. Many of these soldiers didn't start their careers as influential figures. They were ordinary men who had learned to navigate the most complex political game of their time. This story teaches us that, in any age, power is not only in the strongest hands, but also in the most strategic minds. Imagine the center of power in Rome, where every whisper in the corridors of the palace could decide the fate of an empire. The Praetorian Guard, formed to protect the emperor, often played a dual role. While protecting the throne from external threats, they themselves became a constant threat to the sovereign. In an environment where loyalty was more negotiable than solid, betrayals and conspiracies became part of the routine. But how could something so vital to the emperor's safety also be his greatest weakness? The truth is that power corrupts, and in the Praetorian Guard, this maxim was taken to the extreme. These soldiers had direct access to the emperor, his plans, and the inner workings of the empire, and with so much power at their disposal, it didn't take long for many Praetorians to realize that they could manipulate politics for their own benefit. A shrewd commander or a group of well-organized soldiers could easily change the course of Rome, and that is exactly what has happened countless times throughout history. Let's imagine a scene. A Praetorian commander meets in secret with a group of disgruntled senators. They discuss plans to remove the emperor from the throne, replace him with someone more favorable to their interests, and in return secure rewards and promotions. It sounds like something out of a movie, but it was the reality in imperial Rome. Many emperors found their fates sealed by the very hands of the men who were supposed to protect them. These betrayals, however, were not impulsive. They were carefully planned, often motivated by promises of wealth, power, or revenge. And the most intriguing thing is that these conspiracies did not only involve the Praetorians. Senators, military leaders, and even members of the imperial family often teamed up with these elite soldiers to overthrow emperors. This web of treacherous alliances turned Rome into an invisible battlefield where every move could be fatal. But despite the dangers, some Praetorians thrived in this environment. Soldiers with political sagacity knew exactly how to navigate the treacherous waters of the Guard. They built strategic alliances, anticipated conspiracies, and above all, ensured that they were always on the winning side. These men were born survivors, capable of turning even the most dangerous situations into opportunities to rise to the top. However, don't think that all Praetorians were potential traitors. Many were loyal to the emperor and risked their lives to protect him. But the constant uncertainty about who was truly trustworthy created a climate of paranoia in the empire. Emperors often doled out favors and wealth in an attempt to secure the loyalty of their soldiers, but this did not always work. After all, for many, the opportunity to achieve absolute power was simply irresistible. This dynamic between protection and threat made the Praetorian Guard a unique force. They weren't just soldiers, they were political players, capable of deciding the fate of an empire with a simple act of loyalty or betrayal. And this leads us to a fascinating question. Could imperial Rome have survived without the Praetorian Guard? Or was it precisely this duality that shaped the empire as we know it? The legacy of Praetorian conspiracies is a powerful reminder that where there is power, there is intrigue. And in Rome, the price of being at the top was to live constantly looking over your shoulder, never knowing where the next blow would come from. The Praetorian Guard was much more than an elite force. They were the beating heart of the power plays that shaped the history of Rome. These soldiers, who began as protectors of the empire, became the manipulators of the most crucial decisions, playing an essential role in the rise and fall of emperors. From the brutal murder of Caligula to the astonishing proclamation of Claudius as emperor, the Praetorians didn't just witness these events, they created them. And for the smartest and most ambitious within these ranks, every moment of crisis was a golden opportunity to leverage their position and seize power that seemed unimaginable. Now, imagine what it would be like to live in that era, knowing that a single decision by a Praetorian commander could change the fate of the entire empire. It is almost impossible to grasp the impact these soldiers had on the course of history. Even after their dissolution at the hands of Constantine in the 4th century, the legacy of the Praetorian Guard remained alive. They left an indelible mark on the narrative of Roman power, proving that skill, strategy, and ambition could turn ordinary men into immortal figures. As we reflect on the history of the Praetorian Guard, it becomes clear that their impact was not only political, but also cultural. They teach us a timeless truth. Where there is power, there is ambition, and where there is ambition, there are those willing to do anything to achieve it. This lesson resonates even today, reminding us that true power often lies in the hands of those who know how to manipulate it. Finally, take with you the inspiration that even the simplest among us can shape destiny as long as they know how to use their intelligence and strategy. The story of the Praetorian Guard is a powerful reminder that ambition, when combined with skill and opportunity, can transform lives and change the world. So, would you face these challenges? Or better yet, do we today have the same determination to overcome our own obstacles and achieve our goals? After all, each of us has our own battlefield to face, and the story of these soldiers can inspire us to fight with more courage and perseverance. What did you think of these 15 incredible facts about the rise of a Roman soldier in the Praetorian Guard? Isn't it simply fascinating to imagine how these men, often coming from humble origins, managed to endure such an arduous and challenging journey? They were not just warriors, they were strategists, visionaries, and survivors, in a world where only the most prepared could stand out. Now think carefully. What drove these men? It wasn't just the thirst for power, but the hope of achieving something greater. Honor, recognition, perhaps even a place in history. To reach the elite of the Praetorian Guard, they faced brutal battles, endured betrayals within their own ranks, and had to navigate a political game that was often more dangerous than the battlefields. And always remember, whenever you want to learn how Rome became the greatest empire of antiquity, just go to the pinned comment and get your digital book, 10 Battles That Shaped the Roman Empire. Get it today because supplies are limited. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video so more people can learn about this incredible legacy. See you in the next chapter of our exploration.